If you're new to the channel, then welcome, and if you're returning to the channel, then welcome back. I just want to extend a quick thank you to all of you for tuning in. Now, first, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, I did shave my face during No Shave November. It was an accident. I do it every year for some reason. I shave my face, so then I look at the calendar, and then I'm like, oh crap, I wasn't supposed to shave. So you'll, just have to get used to it for a few weeks, and by the time you get used to it, my beard will be back anyway. Anyway, last week I made a video talking about my prediction on what would happen to the stock market and the economy based on who was elected president, either Joe Biden or Donald Trump, and it's been a week since the election, which brings us to today's video. Now, in case you missed last week's video, I'll just give you the cliff notes, the summary that too long didn't watch. I predicted that if Joe Biden were elected president, that we'd probably see a short-term dip in the stock market, and this was because of Joe Biden's tax plan, which includes increasing the capital gains tax as well as increasing the corporate tax rate. Now, for short to medium-term investors and traders, this might disincentivize them to participate because, they would have to pay a higher capital gains tax on anything that they made in their trading or investing of stocks. And it also might cause some people to pull out their money in the short to medium term if they believe that they're going to have to pay a higher tax under a Joe Biden presidency. When it came to Donald Trump, I predicted that if he got re-elected as the president, then we'd probably see an increase or a rise in the stock market in the short term. And the reason being is, whether you believe he's actually responsible for it or not, Donald Trump has done a very good job of associating himself and trying to sell this idea that he was the president during one of the longest bull market runs in US history, and he's been the one responsible for all of the quick rebound from the pandemic recession that we felt and are continuing to feel in some areas, at least a stock market rebound. So from that perspective, if you're a trader or an investor, you might feel like, hey, there's some stability with Donald Trump in terms of the stock market, and if he continues to be president, then we do have that kind of certainty and this idea in our minds that even during a pandemic, he's able to keep the stock market up and running healthy. Now, like I stressed in last week's video, I want to stress it again. This is not an endorsement of Joe Biden or an endorsement of Donald Trump or a bashing of either of them. These are really just kind of the conclusions that I came to based on what I was reading in the news and all of my research that I've been doing and what I've been reading online. And as we all know, the best place to figure out what's going to happen in the real world is what you read online, obviously. Anyway, the key point that I ended on the video last week was that we really won't see the effects that will happen on the economy and the stock market specifically until the sitting president, or until the elected president becomes the sitting president next January. And until that time period, that little gap between now and January 20th, I think, we will see volatility in the stock market. Well, so far, the results of the election have been that the Associated Press, along with a lot of other news media outlets, have called the election for Joe Biden. And if we take a look at something like the Dow Jones, which will kind of be our representative of the stock market, we can see that it's actually been on the up and rise ever since the election kicked off, which is kind of contrary to what I was saying if Joe Biden was elected president. So it's quite possible that I was wrong in my prediction about what would happen if Joe Biden got elected president in terms of the stock market and the economy, but I don't think that I'm wrong, and I am going to double down on my prediction. And the first reason is because of the way I ended the video last week, saying that we're going to see a lot of volatility. So if you've been paying attention to the news, which you probably have because it's the election and a lot of people are paying attention, then you know that Donald Trump has not conceded to the results of the election and is pretty much fighting the results of the election. His legal team has put together a handful of lawsuits citing things like just, general voter fraud, questioning the authenticity of ballots, and overall improper voting practices in some areas. Joe Biden, on the other hand, seems to just be gearing up and getting ready for what he believes is his upcoming presidency. Now, I'm going to try and avoid making too much of an opinion on whether or not Trump actually has a case to fight the results of the election, or if Joe Biden should be worried at all, or if he should be even spending his time gearing up for presidency. I'm not really too concerned about that from a presidential candidate perspective. But what this certainly does, the effect that it will have, is it's going to add another layer of complexity and uncertainty around the future of the country and thus the future of the economy and stock market. See, one of the biggest things that the stock market and the economy responds to is stability and certainty. And it's one of the key reasons that I figured if Donald Trump were reelected, then we would probably see a stabilization or a continued small rise in the stock market, because investors and traders and people who are participating in the stock market know what they're getting with Donald Trump. But now, with this extra fuel thrown into the fire of the results of the election, and Donald Trump continuing to fight it, and Joe Biden just gearing up as if there is not much to worry about, I think adds a little bit of that uncertainty back into the mix. Again, I'm not making a political statement here. I'm not saying that Trump should be reelected, and I'm not saying Joe Biden should be elected. And, that to me, again, doesn't really matter. But frankly, I think the longer that situation drags on and the more instability that it creates in the country, then there's a good chance that we're going to see some longer term negative effects on the economy and the stock market. And the reason is because if Trump does gain any ground on any of these lawsuits that he's been filing, and there is a massive recount, or if the election results go the other way after something like a recount, then something like that puts the pandemic, an upcoming stimulus bill, and just the future of the economy on the back burners. And when a situation like that occurs, it's really the American people, the citizens, who end up having to eat the real cost of all of that. I mean, remember, it's been 8 months since the very first stimulus bill was passed. I predicted that we wouldn't see one until basically January, and so far it's looking like for that prediction, I've been correct. Now, we also have to consider the effects that a second lockdown might have on the economy. There was some good news that came out this week about a pharmaceutical company called Pfizer and their ability to create a vaccine that's had very, so far, good and interesting results. And while it seems promising, of course, we don't know officially how long it will take to actually get the vaccine out to people. It does have to go through a process of, further testing. It has to get passed by the FDA, and then you're talking about distributing it to tens of millions of people. And I believe it's during that time gap in the winter months, where we already have a high cold and flu season, where we could see another type of lockdown or elevated response to the pandemic if cases continue to rise as they have been over the past few weeks. Now, if something like that happens, then it's a pretty good case that we will see some negative economic impacts. If something like that does become the case, then I believe pretty much unanimously across the board, any countries that have had to go through an extended period of lockdown or elevated response to the pandemic have experienced some kind of negative impact on their local economies and stock markets. So ultimately, I do stand by my statements that I made last week. We're going to see a lot of volatility until January. And I think that the announcement that Pfizer made is a perfect example of this volatility. It caused the Dow to jump several hundred points, and realistically, there's still a lot of testing that has to be done. It has to go through the FDA still, and I believe it's a 2-part vaccination. And how many people are going to be willing to take the vaccine is another big question. Now, for me, I'm hoping that we can just get a lot of these questions resolved. I think it's a good idea to get them handled as quickly as possible, and we can move forward and figure out what direction that the country is headed in. And when it comes to the Pfizer vaccine, I actually hope that it's very effective and it's safe. That way we can start getting back to the way things were pre-pandemic. But until then, make sure everyone is staying safe out there. Comment down below. Let me know what you think about the presidential election results. And does Trump have a case, or is Joe Biden definitely going to be the president in January? And on top of that, what do you think of this Pfizer vaccine? Other than that, give the video a like, and I will see you all next time.